Look into my eyes. You're going to watch this video and enjoy it. 3, 2, 1, you're back in the room. In this video, I'm going to talk about pacing and leading, which you find both in neurolinguistic programming as well as hypnosis, and why it is essential to you being a better influencer and a better persuader. But before I get into that, if you find yourself liking this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button and the bell so you'll be notified when I put new videos out. And of course, as always, if you take a look in the description right here down below, right beneath this video, you will see that I have left some links in there, one of which is something I'm giving away for free. I learned NLP before I learned hypnosis. And one thing that you learn in NLP is what we call pacing and leading. Some of you might be familiar with what pacing is, though you might not know that word. So pacing would be those things that we do to match and mirror someone in order to build rapport. So that could be me watching someone's breathing and matching their breathing with my own breathing. That would be me matching the other person's gestures. If the person reaches up and maybe scratches the side of their face, about 3 seconds later, I'm going to put my hand up. I don't necessarily have to scratch my face, but I want to do a gesture that is very similar. Now, why do we want to do that? Because of what we call mirror neurons. It is reflective of the other person experiencing what you're experiencing, especially if they're in good rapport with you. So we can sort of make that happen. We can sort of create that sense for that other person that they are familiar to us. And that's what rapport is, and that's what pacing is. So pacing is really about sort of being in the same pace as that other person, sort of matching their world, matching their reality. And so, like I mentioned, there's a variety of ways to do that. Breathing is one of them. Your hand gestures are another. Matching the other person's posture, matching the person's tonality, how they're speaking. Any of their mannerisms are what we call the nonverbal cues or nonverbal behaviors that someone is doing. Anything other than, what exactly they're saying, that would be a form of pacing. But actually, we can also do what the person is saying. You've probably heard this before. If a person says, well, what I'm looking for, and they sort of give you a range of things, values, whatever it is that they're looking for, and then you repeat back to them, you say, well, so what you're looking for is, and you don't repeat word for word what they said, because then that would sound like you're just copying them, but you more or less sort of mix it up a little bit, but you use some of their own words, and you basically repeat back to them what they just said. That is a form of pacing. You're getting the person to feel like they're on the same plane as you are, or that you are on the same plane as them. This builds rapport, this builds trust, and then when that happens, you can then start to lead them. Meaning, once they're in rapport with you, once a person is in rapport, they have a tendency to want to stay in rapport. So maybe for a while, I'm pacing them, what they say, what their gestures are. I'm trying to match, them as best that I can. And at a certain point, I'm going to start to get the feeling that, okay, I think we're in rapport. It's something you can kind of feel. You kind of feel like the person loosening up, the person is starting to connect with you. And then you can test this by making a hand gesture or something that is not you following them, but you starting to lead. So you do that. Maybe you just make a hand gesture that they haven't made yet. And then you see if they follow you. Did they do something similar? And if they do, then you're in a position of leading them. And that's when you know that they will follow you if you start taking them in a new direction. So what would be the setup for something like this? Well, it could be pretty much anything. It could be sales, especially. It could be therapy. It could be coaching. Now, when I coach somebody, because most people who I coach, they see me on YouTube first, we're sort of already in rapport. They have seen me work. They have seen my videos. They have a sense of already knowing me. So I don't have to do much pacing. I'm kind of lucky that way. But before I had a YouTube channel and I would coach, the person, usually in the first session, was still kind of like, I don't know about this coach. I'm paying him some money and I'm not sure if this person can help me. So I would have to work a little bit harder to sort of pace that. I was in insurance sales at one time. And people coming in, being an insurance salesman, people tend to see you as like just a step above a used car salesman. So they're kind of iffy with you. And so you really have to work hard in that situation, especially if you're selling something like life insurance, to really pace that person and get them to trust you. Another example of pacing is if somebody is very angry, we often hear things like, well, you stay calm. And if you stay calm, you wait for that person to sort of come down and calm down. And that can happen, but it often doesn't happen. And if a person's kind of worked up and they're kind of angry about something, and I had, believe me, plenty of insurance clients who would call me even yelling at me. What I noticed is that if I stayed calm the whole time and just said, well, sir, this is how things work, and just did all that, they actually had a tendency to get louder and more angry. And then when I started learning NLP and learning about pacing, I thought, well, I wonder what would happen if I paced that. And so somebody would call and they would be yelling at me. I started yelling back at them. Guess what happened? They started to calm down. And then as they calmed down, I would go with them and I would start to calm down. And then I would try to get ahead of it and start to lead them in a new direction. So in a sense, I was pacing and leading. I thought this was very strange. I thought, wow, like that goes against everything that I've ever been told. Like, don't get angry, don't yell back at the customer. But what was happening there? Well, if I wasn't getting worked up like the other person was, I think what they felt was like I wasn't truly listening to them. I wasn't truly understanding their situation. So when I would get worked up, and it wasn't me like yelling back at them insults or anything like that, but like if they would call them, do you know what your company did to me? And I would say like, no, what did my company do to you? And so if I paced what they were saying, then they felt heard and they felt, oh, okay, this guy gets me. And then they would start to calm down. So if somebody comes at you right off the bat with an objection, if you try to push back on that objection right away, or if you mismatch what they're saying, their tonality of what they're saying, chances are they're not going to feel like you understand them and that you're hearing them. So you want to pace that. So if they're worked up, match their level of being worked up. Don't go overboard. Don't go over the top. But if somebody's really excited and they've got a lot of emotion in what it is that they're saying, if you match that, then you're pacing them and then you can take them somewhere else. But if you go against that, or even we can mismatch or break or go against the pacing rule. But if a person says, well, this is what I've heard, and I say, nope, that's not true. Well, that's not an example of pacing. Now, that doesn't mean that I can't say that. It just means, well, what is my objective here with this person? Do I want to pace and lead this person? Maybe I do. Or sometimes when I debate people, sometimes online, who I'm pacing and leading is not the person I'm debating with. I know that I'm not going to convince them of anything. It's the viewer, it's the watcher, the silent reader who's reading the debate. That's who I'm playing to. So I'm trying to pace and lead that person. So you got to be very clear about who you're trying to influence. If there's somebody who I know I'm going to debate, I'm going to argue with, and the point is not for me to change their mind, but to change the mind of the people listening, that's my audience. That's who I want to pace and lead. And so my concern is with them. And so by coming straight out and objecting to what my opponent is saying, then that might pace very well with the person I'm trying to reach, but not the person I'm actually arguing with. So keep that in mind. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't understand. They don't understand who their audience truly is. Who is it that you're trying to influence? And so make sure you're clear about that. Now, when I started learning hypnosis, I didn't know how much of NLP was modeled after hypnosis. I knew that it had some effect on it. I knew that they took some stuff from hypnosis. But what I didn't know is that pacing and leading comes directly from hypnosis. So when I first started learning hypnosis, one of the first things in the class was they taught pacing and leading. And I thought, oh, okay, cool. I know this. I've done NLP training already. But no, it was different. What was great about this is that it taught me truly what pacing and leading was, or where its origins came from. So in hypnosis, the idea is that the person's not going to be in a sales situation with you or a dating situation with you or anything like that. Usually the way that they teach it is the person is coming to you as a client and you're going to do hypnotherapy with them. What you would do is the person would sit down and you would say, get comfortable. But if the person's new to you or you're new to them, chances are they're not going to be too comfortable. And especially with this idea of hypnosis, people can be a little uncomfortable about it. So what you do in pacing and leading in hypnosis is you start to say things that are verifiably true and that the person cannot argue with. So you would say things like, okay, you're sitting there, you're listening to my voice, and you're beginning to relax the more you listen to me speak. So what did I do there? 2 pacings. I said, you're sitting there. And so they're sitting there, can't argue with that. You're listening to the sound of my voice, can't argue with that, can I? Or can they? And you're beginning to relax as you listen to the sound of my voice. So the pace, lead. Now, you might have to do more pacing if the person is really not comfortable with you. So it may take more, but the more you pace and then lead, the more they're going to follow. So you're saying things that they know to be true. It's familiar to them. They can't deny it. They can't object to it. So that makes it more likely that when you say a leading statement, that they will then follow you. And that's the same way pacing and leading works with NLP. You are, in some sense, following what is true for them. You're matching their tonality, you're matching their posture, you're matching them as much as you possibly can. And that for them is a pacing, but it's very unconscious. It's not overt. It's not as overt as when you would do it overtly with hypnosis. But still, even when you do it with hypnosis, it still has that, it flies below radar. It's really going more to the person's unconscious rather than their conscious. So the idea with pacing is to get the person to let their guard down, which is to speak directly to their unconscious so that the conscious mind starts to relax its objections and relax its filters so it stops blocking out what you're trying to do. When it comes to sales, when I was doing insurance sales, I found one of the best ways to pace was just to ask the person a lot of good questions. So just asking questions about their situation, what it is they're looking for in their insurance. If you watch my videos, you know I do a lot of value solicitation. I would do that with my clients. I'd want to know, what was it that they valued about perhaps the service that I provided. If they came in to see me, I'd like to know, well, what motivated them to come and see me. And sometimes they would just say, well, because you called me and you said we should have an appointment and review my insurance. And I would say, oh, okay, but you still said yes, and you still thought something was important enough to come here and review your insurance. So I'm just wondering what is important to you about that? And then the person would, say, well, maybe I want to be sure that I'm secure. I'd be, oh, okay, great. So what's important to you about that? Asking these questions is really a form of pacing. I'm getting to know their world. I'm getting to understand what is important to them. And there's nothing better that you could do with a client, whether that's a therapy client, a coaching client, or someone you're selling something to, than to truly understand what is important to them and what it is that they want. So not only are you pacing them, but you're setting yourself up for a good lead. Once you know what is important to that person, then you can say, well, hey, here's what I've got for you that I think is going to fit for you very well, because this is what's important to you. So because this is what is important to you, then this is going to help you protect that or help get you that. So you pace by asking good questions and taking in good information. And then you start leading by taking that information and applying it to whatever it is that you're selling, or if you're a therapist or a coach, the direction you want to move the person in. I just recently got a comment on one of my videos, somebody saying, I thought NLP was about dating. And it was one of my videos about NLP that had nothing to do with dating. But yeah, you can use NLP and hypnosis with dating. Now, this can be kind of controversial because people are like, oh, you're just, you're jumping in, you're getting into the woman's head and you're programming. And there can be an element of that, but it certainly is not necessary. Dating can be no different than sales. In fact, I remember before I became a salesperson, I worked for an organization and they had salespeople there. And I noticed that in the company, the people who were the most successful in dating were the salespeople. Now, why was that? Because they were just good communicators and they knew how to communicate their value. You can use the same thing in dating. And I used to do this where I would see a woman who I was attracted to. It's actually how I met my wife. And I would approach them. And what I would do when I would approach is I would start a little pacing. I would say, hey, I saw you down the road or down the sidewalk or across the street. Okay, so that's a form of pacing. They can't argue with that. They're like, well, okay, yeah, he saw me here because I am in fact here. And I would even say something like that. Hey, I was across the street. I saw you here, and I thought you looked very attractive. So what am I doing? I'm telling them things that they cannot argue with. That is true, and then they will probably agree with you. Well, like, yeah, I'm pretty attractive. And then I would say, and I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is, and then introduce myself. So starting off with a form of pacing right there, and then from there, I would actually do more listening. I would do some questions, to find out a little bit about who they are. Do I even want to spend some time with this person? Do I want to go out on a date with this person? I need a little bit more information. And in gathering that information, All of that was a form of pacing. And then building on that, I would then say something like, hey, well, I've got to go. I'm doing this other thing. I just happen to notice you here. But, I'd love to continue this conversation. How about we meet for coffee or something like that? So the pacing leads you to a place where the next step just seems obvious. It just seems natural and normal. And so they are more likely to follow. And in the sales situation, it's the same thing. You're gathering good information, you're pacing their world, you're matching and you're mirroring them. And so it becomes natural that the next step would be to buy this thing that you're offering, as long as it fits their needs. I wouldn't suggest doing this and trying to sell something that isn't really a fit for what the person is looking for. That will backfire on you. They'll have buyer's remorse, and it's just not the kind of business and kind of sales that you want to do. And then the same thing with therapy, or coaching. When I went with my coaching clients, I spend usually 2 complete sessions more in elicitation. I want to know what their values are. I want to know how their internal structures are, how they think about things, how they construct their beliefs. And I spend about 2 sessions doing that. I want to know what is important to them. I want to know how they construct their world. And in the process of gathering that information, that is a form of pacing. So by the time we're done with that, they are ready. They are ready for me to lead. They are ready for me to take them down the rabbit hole that I need to take them through so that they can transform themselves. So pacing and leading is essential. If you try to skip this, if you think, oh, I don't need this, you do this at your own peril. This is a natural part of human processing. It either happens or it doesn't. And when it doesn't happen, you are not going to influence, you are not going to persuade. You have to pace and then lead. This is a process that is inevitable. You cannot bypass it. You cannot skip it. So learn it, practice it, make it a part of your communication, make it part of who you are. So essentially what you're doing when you're pacing and leading is you are functioning, you're communicating on both a conscious and an unconscious level. And that is going to just have the greatest impact. If you're only focused on the conscious communication and nothing else, you're limiting it. You're doing even less than half. The majority of the way that we communicate, the majority of how we receive communication is usually nonverbal, and it's usually unconscious. So pacing and leading really helps you understand and communicate on both the conscious and unconscious level. So make sure you're doing this. So if you'd like to understand better how to pace and lead, more specifically pacing, it's essential that you develop your sensory acuity. It's essential that you develop your calibration skills. So I have a free 30-day program. It's an email program. You get emailed once a day for 30 days on something new to practice to cultivate your sensory acuity. Your sensory acuity is cultivating that sensitivity to pick up that nonverbal communication. And just by doing that alone, is a form of pacing, and the person will experience it. They won't know exactly how you're making them feel so comfortable or that they feel so seen. But when you're paying attention to not just what a person says, but also all the nonverbal communication, they will feel it on an unconscious level, as if you really get them on a level. That amount of attention is not something they're used to experiencing. So when you're giving a person that much attention, they will give you a lot. They will tell you almost anything that you need to know in order to take them to that next level, to lead them. So in the description right here down below, you'll find a link. Just click that link and you can get access to this 30-day free sensory acuity program. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button and the bell so you'll be notified when I put new videos out. And last but not least, if you can think of a friend or a family member who would benefit from this video, make sure you share it with them. Take care.